Welcome to the Manders Mindset podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Welcome back to Manders Mindset, where we explore the power of shifting your mindset to shift your life. I'm your host, Amanda Russo, and I am so excited to be here with today's guest. And I am here today with Aneta, and she is a coach and consultant and the founder of the Ardelian Kuzma Group, LLC. Her passion is helping her clients create transformational change. She is a former bank executive. Now she works with high-achieving professionals and entrepreneurs to create mindful leadership, increase focus, creativity, and productivity.
Oh, Amanda, I'm so excited to be here with you.
Of course. So who would you say Aneta is at the core?
At my core, I just always think of myself as this very curious being, who is here to love other people, to explore all the beauty of life, to create, to learn, to grow, to develop relationships, and then my sort of earthly things I think about is I'm a mom and a wife and a friend. And in the end, I think I'm here to just be someone who is like a vessel for God's love. That's really what I see myself as.
Have you always been a curious being?
Yes, I was an only child for first almost 8 years of my life. And so I played a lot with like in my own head. And I was always curious about adult conversations because there weren't, other kids around necessarily. I immigrated at a young age with my parents from the former Yugoslavia. And so I couldn't speak English when I first started school. So I just observed, right? When you have no language, like you could just observe people, but you can't necessarily communicate back. And I think that just developed other skills in me where I was able to just pay attention. And then when I started being able to pick up on the language, but maybe I couldn't speak as well, then I also was able to start to listen actively. And I think all of those things really help with the curiosity. And so that's why I love having my own podcast too, because I'm so curious about people's lives and asking questions. And coaching as well, right? We just ask questions to help unearth whatever is already within the other person.
Now, can you tell us a little more about your childhood upbringing?
So came like right before kindergarten, moved with my parents. My grandparents were already here in Cleveland. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. And so it was really hard at trying to fit in and adjust to a new culture and to a new home and leaving all the stuff behind. And I think the language barrier, cultural barriers, that was hard. And so I think at a young age, just always had this strong desire to want to fit in, to belong, to look and say, what are other people doing? And what do I need to do in order to get into this crowd, into this group? And so I also developed at a very young age this desire I had to work really hard to catch up, right? So I had to work really hard to try to catch up on the language side and with school. So hard work. And then I became very addicted to praise and just external validation because it was a signal that like, yes, you're on the right track, you're doing the right thing, or you're not. And so I think that was the conditioning that developed at a very young age.
Now, how old were you when you were able to speak English?
So I remember kids pick up pretty quickly. So I would say kindergarten, like nothing. And then probably towards the end of the year, like I was speaking, but my reading was I was still in the lowest reading group when I started first grade. And that was really upsetting to me because it was me and like three boys that misbehaved. And my goal was, I remember that by the end of the first grade to get into the regular reading group. And then there was a higher one. By second grade, I was already a straight A student and just like really doing well. So I think it was probably from nothing to like better, over the course of 2 years. And then by second grade, I felt like you learn the language skills, but you still don't have all of the cultural references. And then you don't have necessarily parents at home who are able to help with that. So any expression like just went over my head because I never heard them before.
And now, how was schooling for you as you started to go about your grade school years?
It became everything for me. I loved learning, I think because I put so much effort into it. And then when it got easier, I just had such a desire to read because I read so much trying to catch up. And so loved learning. Once I started talking, I was the nerd in the front row, center seat, and raised my hand to answer anything because I think it must have felt like freedom for me. Like, oh, I can finally do this. I finally know what's going on. I loved school. I probably would continue to take classes for the rest of my life. I've always just had this desire to learn more. I think it goes back to that curiosity.
Now, were you involved in extracurriculars in school?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, what was I into? So like I played volleyball, even though I'm short. And then I was in speech and debate, going back, like mock trial, drama club. I'm trying to think what else. Kind of the nerdy things. And I wasn't into too many sports, but I did like volleyball. So
And now, did you go to college?
I did. I did undergrad and I did grad school. I studied literature. I thought I wanted to be a professor. So studied literature and French and women's studies undergrad. And then when I started working and the kids were a little bit older at that point, I did an executive MBA program just to get my business degree. And so did that. And then I had an additional schooling for banking, which is funny. I worked in banking for 22 years. So they sent us to an executive banking school in the summers, which was really funny. So the nerd theme continues.
And did you always have an interest in getting involved in banking?
No, I never had an interest. It was like one of those things where I just, my husband's from New York. So we lived in New York after we got married and then moved back to Cleveland. And I wanted to work for a company that was located in the city, in headquarters, because it was easier to kind of grow in the organization. And at that time, like my generation, we liked staying at a company for a long time if you could and just growing. And, nowadays, I think this generation, the average they stay is like a year and a half in any role, or any company, which I think is so different than what we did before. And so I just ended up in banking because it was a headquarters and I had a friend who worked there in HR and she's like, hey, they're looking to hire in this position. You should apply. And so I did. And I ended up staying 22 years, which, wasn't necessarily what I planned, but I was able to work on some really interesting things and with some good leaders. And then, until it was time to start my own thing.
I gotcha. Now, what made you make that transition and leave? 22 years is a long time.
It's a long time. I just felt like I couldn't see myself retiring from banking and I didn't know what was next. I had the coolest jobs in the organization. I worked with great leaders. And after a while, I was like, I don't know. I just can't see myself staying here, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And if I wanted to move into nonprofit or if I wanted to work in a different industry or do something different, I was kind of bored at that point too. And I was tired of all the financial crises. I've lived through a couple of those while I was there. And so I hired a coach. And that's when I did the deep work to say, what do I really want? Like if I had, opened up a new box of crayons and I had this big poster board in front of me, like, would I design myself going back to some sort of a corporate job again, or what would it look like? And for the first time, probably forever, I allowed myself to dream and to say, what could this look like? What are the things I really enjoy? What do I want my life to look like this next chapter? And after some time, I was able to write a whole vision paper and what I wanted. And I fell in love with coaching. And so I knew I wanted to start some coaching business. And I really enjoyed the space of wellness. And I just had dreams that I always wanted to do. I always wanted to write books, and I love listening to podcasts. So I was like, oh, that would be so great if I had a podcast one day, or I would love to do retreats all over the world. So I allowed myself just to have these big dreams and didn't care how it would come together. And now, over 6 years later, I have all those things in my business, and this is my life. And so it's one of those stories where I look back and I just think I didn't know how I would get here, but I didn't dim my dream or make it smaller just because I didn't know how. I allowed myself to dream really big dream, and then knew that I'd just figure out how to get here eventually. You don't do everything all at once, and that's not, we don't need to, but I always kept that dream alive and just would always look at the vision and go, okay, this is what I'm working towards.
Now, did you have any hesitation with hiring your first coach?
Yes, because I didn't invest money in myself like that. I didn't even go and pay to get a massage once a month, let alone invest in coaching. And so, one, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to invest the time. I'm going to invest the money. I better be serious. Is this going to work? It was the single most important decision that I've done recently, because I wouldn't be here today if I didn't do it, because I wouldn't have been able to figure it out on my own, because that's the beauty of working with someone who already has gone before you and done it. They can help you. They can shortcut it. They can tell you the things to look out for. They can ask the right questions. And so I'm so glad that I finally agreed to do it, because it changed everything.
I was just curious because, coaching is new and some people still have that reluctancy with it, even more so because of the newness of it.
I think it's been around for a long time. I just think that there's a lot of people that now call themselves coaches. So yes, I agree with you that it's much more mainstream and you see it everywhere. But the one woman I hired, she'd been an executive coach for a long time, and I knew her. And so I knew that if I chose to hire a coach, that I would reach out to Roxanne. And I'm so glad that I did. And she had gone through her own, she was in corporate and went through this herself. And so that was really helpful for me too, because she understood me and she had been where I was.
And now, how soon after you started coaching did you uncover that's what you wanted to do as well?
So we worked together for 6 months, and it was definitely during that time when I was working on the vision that I said, I think this is what I want to do. Like, I just fell in love with the process so much, and I loved how much I had changed during that process. And I thought, if I can help other people do this and transform, then I will be doing great work in the world. I always had teams. I always had big teams at work. And so I was coaching people that worked for me for years. And I really enjoyed that. I loved that aspect of my job. So it didn't feel like a foreign concept to me. It just was like, wow, I get to do this all the time now.
I love that. Wow. It's never too late. Even 22 years, if you were doing something, whether you loved it or I like that.
Yeah. So I think I hired Roxanne at 45. And when I turned 47, 2 years later, I was ready to leave. I had a vision and I had an action plan, and I wasn't ready to leave yet. I was putting things in place. I was working during the day, a couple hours in the evening, a couple hours on the weekends. And suddenly, after 2 years, I was ready to finally say, I'm ready to go.
Wow. I love that. And thank you for sharing how old you were, like that vulnerability. I think that really shows even more so, like, because people say to me all the time, like, oh, you look so young. Of course you can shift. Like, I'm 28.
Yeah.
Like I left my paralegal job and like people look at it differently after being a paralegal for 4 years when I was 24, so I appreciate your vulnerability. And
Yeah.
I know, like,
Yeah, I own my age, and because I think I'm so grateful that I'm not counting down till retirement. I'm like building what I love. And, I'm 53 now, and I'm so happy that I get to decide, I get to build, I get to spend my day the way I want to with the people that I want to. And, entrepreneurship is not for everybody, but if you want to do it, it's never too late. to change. Like, that's a powerful message I hope everyone hears.
No, I love that. If you don't want to retire from where you are and you're not happy, like life is short. It's long,
Yep.
but it's short.
Yeah, it's so true.
Is there anything that helped you align your day to make this transition? Because I'm
Oh,
sure this is a big transition from your day to day.
oh, yeah. Man, that's such a great question because there are so many fears that I had and that still come up all the time, right? People are like, oh, how did you get over your fear? And like, you just don't. You just continue to take action despite the fear and do a lot of work, continue to move through it. But for me, I always start my day, and I did even before when I was in corporate, like really starting my day in quiet, journaling, reading from really inspiring books, meditating, doing the things that I knew I needed in order to ground myself, to be connected, to regulate my nervous system, do breath work, all of those things, connect, pray. And then I was able to go to work. I love that I had those practices already established because those were the same practices I continued when I left. And then, when you leave, the shock to the system is that instead of going from a calendar where you're double and triple booked and you've got stuff going from morning till night, you have an empty calendar where there's nothing on it. It's like blank. And it's up to you to decide, okay, what am I adding here? Where are my clients going to come from? Who am I meeting with? Who am I networking with? Right. But what was consistent and constant was my morning practice always. And that was perfect because I had that already established and that was very helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious when you got into breath work.
So I've been practicing yoga and meditation for decades, since the 90s. When I went through yoga teacher training, I got certified to teach. We did some pranayama, of course. And so we did that type of yogic breath. And then in 2021, I want to say it was in the fall, I was at a conference in LA and Samantha Skelly from Pause Breathwork guided us through a breathwork session and I didn't even know what happened. Like I was cracked open. I was crying, ugly crying. I was like, what is going on here? And I literally like started following her on Instagram, sent like a DM or they messaged me or somehow I got on with her team the next morning for a call and like signed up for the 6-month certification program, like right away. Well, I was still at the conference. Like I couldn't even wait to get home. I was like, oh, I got to do this. And they just had one that started like that Monday. I have to do this because I need to go deeper into this and see what it is. And I need to bring it to all my coaching clients because I love bringing in modalities and practices and energetics and other things besides coaching to really help my clients. Many of them that come to me, they're burned out, they're exhausted, they're not regulated. And so anything that I can bring in that helps them get back to a state of regulation, then we can do the work. It's really hard to help someone vision and see differently when they're in survival mode. And so breath work has just been so impactful for me, but then also for my clients as well.
Do you do it with all your clients?
I'm trying to think. Most of them, yes. Most of them, I think some are more open to me sending them like recordings and then they can do it on their own. But I always introduce it to everybody so that they can experience it. I haven't had one person say, oh, I don't like this. They're always like, oh, that felt so good. It's like you could just feel their body and you could see when they finally drop in and you're like, oh, there you go. There you go. It's amazing.
I love how you said you always introduce it because I think some people have a lot of reluctancy when they first hear breathwork because they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fear around the unknown. And
Yeah.
I think it's phenomenal that you still introduce it and just bring normalcy to it because so many people are like, what is this?
I think because meditation has become so mainstream and people now know about it. When I talk about the neuroscience and I talk about the nervous system, and then people understand it. And I talk about stress hormones. There is some level of understanding that most people have. And when you're able to bring in the science behind it and do it in a way that doesn't feel too for them or too spiritual or whatever it is that they're scared of or nervous about, when you're able to explain it and then just kind of demonstrate, and I even talk about just how our special forces use breath work before they go into combat. And so Navy SEALs are, using 4-7-8 breath and box breath. And so then it's like, oh, that's interesting. Well, why? Because it's the fastest way to regulate. And when you're able to regulate, then you're able to use the frontal cortex to think instead of the limbic part of the brain. So, suddenly I think it gives credibility to a practice that maybe they just weren't that familiar with before.
That makes a lot of sense. And I like how you mentioned the special forces. Yeah, it's true. Like so many things use it, people think it's this woo thing. And I've spoken to people even like for fitness, for the special forces, for MMA, for different things. And they're like, you control your breathing. And
Yeah, I know. When did you get into breath work?
In 2023.
Okay. Did you go through a special program?
Breathwork detox with
Okay.
Curtis Thomas.
Okay.
Have you heard?
No, I don't think so. It was good?
Yeah, it was great. A woman I became friends with through a yoga studio actually had been talking about it a bunch. And she was like, you got to try this if you're into this yoga. And I'm super stubborn to the point where she would say it probably every time I was posting about yoga on Instagram. And it wasn't until 3 or 4 months later on the anniversary of my grandma's passing that I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give it a shot. And I've been hooked.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. I was blown away, and honestly, I really didn't think it was going to do shit. So even more so, I've been so hooked because I'm like, this happened, and all I did was breathe.
I had a friend who he and I had lunch, and I remember telling him he'd done yoga with me before. And I said, hey, I'm really starting to facilitate breath work. I would love to, gift you a session so you could experience it. So he came over and he thought it was going to be like some gentle yin class or something. He didn't know what we were going to do, even though I tried explaining it. And at the end of it, he had such an experience, and he looked at me. He couldn't even speak for a while afterwards, and I just let him integrate and, sit there. And he's like, that was as intense as a psychedelic experience. He's like, he had such a profound experience and shared with me what happened. I checked with him in the next day, and he was still processing, and couldn't believe it. And the cool thing about it is that no 2 sessions are ever going to be the same. You are going to get what you need, and you're not going to be able to hyperventilate yourself into some sort of a experience if that's not what you need in that moment. But the first time people experience it is always my favorite, because they're like, what? Because now you're not in your head. You don't actually know what to expect. And then, you're able to just allow the body to breathe. And that's where the magic just happens.
It is. And I love how you mentioned no 2 sessions are the same. They really aren't.
And that's great. And it's great.
Now, I want to transition a tad. You've mentioned that alignment and action is people's superpowers. Why would you say that?
So I believe in aligned action, right? If you are just working a to-do list and crossing these things off and thinking that somehow that's going to give you fulfillment, you're going to get a little dopamine each time. But if those things don't actually matter, they're not in alignment with what's most important to you, it's not going to bring you the satisfaction or fulfillment. It just won't. And so what is our superpower is when we connect and identify, what are my values? What is most important to me? Maybe it's your family, maybe it's your health, maybe it's your faith, maybe it's your relationships, whatever those are. You make a list of what your values are and the things that are your North Star that are so important. Every single day, I want you to look at your calendar, and I want you to make sure that those values show up on your calendar. If they do not, you are not taking aligned action. You are working and living not in integration to what is most important to you. And when we are able to integrate all of those things together, then we suddenly feel like we are in balance. And then the person is traveling Monday through Friday, sees their kids maybe on Saturday, and starts working again on Sunday. Or if your health is important and you don't eat lunch, you take no breaks, you don't drink your water, like you're not moving your body. And so it really is being accountable to ourselves. Like I say, this is what's important to me. This is what is most important in my life. And making sure that the way we show up every single day aligns to that. And open up your calendar to someone and say, tell me what's most important to me in my life. And if they cannot tell you what's important, because all they see are work meetings, then that's what is most important to you. That's what your schedule is saying is your top value. And that's where I was. And that's why I got burned out, is because the things that were most important to me, I had scraps of time left to give to my family, to my husband, and nothing for myself and my health and all these other things that I said were important. They just never showed up.
I really like how you mentioned to show your calendar, your schedule to somebody else. That's a great example. Some of us might struggle with recognizing, looking at it with our own eyes to see, and might be biased and think that we are making the time. And
Yeah.
because sometimes you can't tell, you're too close to it.
Yeah. And it's an afterthought. Like if you start with your values first, I say, like, if your relationship's important, I tell my clients, how often are you and your partner making time to spend one-on-one? How often are you going on a date? If your family's important, how often are you doing family dinners? Non-negotiable. Like when are you getting together? When are you spending time together? What does that look like in the evenings? If your health is important to you, I want to see, when are you going to your yoga class? When are you taking a walk? When are, going to the gym? How many hours are you sleeping? And when we start putting all of those things on our calendar and we put them in first, guess what? You will work around. The work will still get done. It'll just work around the things that are important to you. It doesn't take a lot. Like you can decide that your best friend and you are going to have a phone conversation, once a week, and maybe while you're going for a walk, and you mark it down in your calendar and you look forward to it, and then it's going to happen. We have to catch up. Okay, yeah, we have to choose to do these things.
Do you think we need to schedule these things?
Yes, absolutely.
You do.
If it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. Literally, I was just with my friend and she's like, hey, I'm coming into town. I said, okay, great. When? She's like, okay, Sunday. I'm like, all right, great. Tell me when you're free next week and let's put it on the calendar, like right away. Not like, oh, call me when you get into town. No, because a million things will happen and something else will come up. But if I know that Wednesday we're doing dinner, guess what? I'm going to honor that commitment and I'm going to look forward to it and I'm going to get excited about it. And all day Wednesday, I'm going to be like, wow, I haven't seen her in months. I can't wait.
That's honestly probably why a lot of things don't happen, that people leave to chance.
So we used to use Franklin Covey planners, which were like daily planners that you write in. And then afterwards, we graduated to Blackberries and then we got Outlook. And so suddenly what happened is that instead of using planners, which were actually looking at your whole life, you had everything in your planner, all your doctor's appointments, your kids' stuff, work, everything. We moved from that to having an Outlook calendar, which is filled with all your work meetings, and then having some sort of a paper to-do list. And there is no integration. And all the things that are no longer on your calendar are all the personal stuff. And so if it's not there, it doesn't get done. It won't happen.
So what is your suggestion? Do you have one for people who are facing this right now and they don't know how to?
I use a planner. I love my planner. It's called Ramona and Ruth. It's the one I like. And I use the daily overview planner. And it allows you to select your top 3 priorities, not 50. And then you set an intention for the day. You list what you're grateful for. You list all your meetings. And mine today literally says date with the divine in the morning, post content, go for a walk, take a bath, plan for the rest of the day, a call, another coaching call, plan for an offer I'm going to create, meet with friends, do a podcast, prep for another call, and then have the call. And then I just listed the other things that I got done. But like literally down to when am I taking a bath? Like, because I was like, oh, I want to soak in the tub today. And then in the evening, it's like asks you, what was your nourishment? What was your active self-care? How did you move your body? How much water did you have? What was your favorite part of your day? And what are the top priorities for tomorrow? So I start with the plan and I end with a reflection in the evening. And guess what? If my reflection says I was tired, I didn't get to half the things on my list, I can make adjustments for tomorrow. And then I close it and I go to bed and I don't have to worry about it because I know what I'm doing tomorrow. It's already planned. So it's just really helps, get us ready for the next day and make adjustments. If something's not working, you can catch it right away and then fix it.
Yeah. Have you always been this organized with your scheduling and your planning?
Yes. I think I've always used a planner because for me, it was helpful to know what I was doing. My head is full of ideas and things anyway. I just don't need it filled with more stuff trying to remember. And so I love the planners, but I've always journaled too. Like there's something that I really enjoy about writing. And so I still love the physical act. And when I'm planning, it feels good to see it on paper. It feels good to kind of spend some time reflecting and thinking. If I see that I have only 1 hour to get something done today and I have 50 things on my list, I'm just going to go, well, this isn't realistic. So really, what are my top priorities and what can I get done in the amount of time that I have? And if I can't get everything done, then I need to say tomorrow, I can't have back-to-back meetings. Tomorrow I need to create more space or I need to get more time done. So you're able to really, from a realistic perspective, align what's important with the amount of time that you have.
Now, I'm curious, do you have suggestions for people if they are struggling to identify what their values are?
Yeah, it's a lot of the work I do with my clients. There's some really great lists you can find online that list a lot of values. And I would say start and circle initially everything that stands out. And then go through a second pass and say, ooh, how many of these are maybe similar that could be combined, right? So if you've got family and relationships, and like friends, you could probably just say relationships, right? And then you can, in your mind, that's all your relationships. And so I would say narrow it down to probably 10 values, core values. And then I have my clients write out a sentence for each one. Like, what does it mean to you? And so if your family is important, then as a value, you could say, my family is the most important thing in my life, and I make time for them every single day. And that means quality time together, whatever it is. Like you just make up a sentence of what that means to you. And then that's the very first part of any vision statement that I work with my clients is just the values. Because guess what? If you have an opportunity come up, and I did this with a client today, and she's looking for a new job, and I looked at her values. Her values were very much about her relationships, her family, her home. She wants to be close to home. And I was like, so if you had a consulting offer that made you travel Monday through Thursday, does that align with your values? She's like, nope. She's like, nope. I go, you're right. This doesn't align. And you'd be upset like probably a weekend. And so it really does help us to think through logically around choices that we make.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm curious I'm sure you've had to, with all of this transition from corporate to now coaching, especially doing it for so long, had to almost redefine success.
For sure. And that was some of the work that I did with my coach too, and I do with all my clients is you have to challenge everything you've ever learned. Because from the youngest of ages, we inherently believe certain rules, right? To make more money is better than making less money. To have a bigger title is more important. To have a nice car, to all these things that society tells us is important that really keeps us on the same hamster wheel. And so for me, like going through and redefining success in every area of life, like what does it mean to me to be healthy? And I was like, I want to have a clear mind. I want to have a healthy body that can move. I want to feel emotionally regulated, right? What does it look like to say that my relationships are successful? Quality time with my kids, with my husband, making time to see my parents every week, reaching out to friends. What does success look like with every single area of life? Even in the area of like joy, like what does it look like to have more joy in my life? Like what brings me joy? And for me, it's like I'm staring at a vase over there. I want fresh flowers all over my house every single week. When we go to the grocery store, we buy fresh flowers because that brings me joy. It also brings me joy to have really good coffee in the morning. So I want the nice coffee that tastes really good, it's like little things like that. One of the things I remember I used to do, I think when I was in corporate, because I was so stressed all the time, I would go to like TJ Maxx and just buy like candles or new journals or just like shop around or whatever. It's like, I don't really have an urge to do that anymore because it's like, I don't need something to like give me a little dopamine hit, like I'm surrounded by the things that bring me joy and that feel good. And so I think it's just taking the time to really ask ourselves those questions in every area and just like questioning everything, right? And I remember when I first left corporate, I was like, I don't want these suits. I don't want these pumps. I don't want to ever wear a pair of pumps again. I don't ever want to wear pantyhose again. I don't want to like button up a suit jacket, And so I'm like, I'm going to go donate these things. I don't want them. Like, I'm just going to burn the boat, right? Like the expression, I'm just burning this boat. I'm not going back into it. I don't want to do that. That doesn't feel good to me. And so, it's like really taking the time and doing the work and asking yourselves the questions.
Yeah. No, I love all that. Like figuring out why and getting curious and about what you want. It's so key. Now, I'm curious, did you face any resistance with how society or the public or people would look at your transition with how long you were in corporate?
When I first made the announcement that I was leaving, I had a coworker who was like, "What are you doing? Like, you're leaving to go teach yoga? What is happening?" Like, they didn't understand. And that was some folks. And then other people assumed I was fired or something. And I'm like, no. One guy asked me what it feels like knowing I'll never make the same amount of money. And I was just like, I'll make more. Don't worry about it. It was so interesting. And then other people were like, oh my God, I'm so jealous. I can't believe it. I just envy your courage. And so there was all kinds of responses. And I remember being worried. My husband was super supportive. Obviously, none of this was a surprise to him. And I stayed for 4 months after I did, just to kind of, work on where's my team going to go. So I worked with my boss on making sure everything was all buttoned up. But I remember so worried to tell my parents. And I said to them, but don't worry. Like I shared everything as I go, but don't worry, I'll be okay. And my parents were like, we've never worried about you. Like, of course, we're supportive. Like, of course you'll be fine, And I didn't expect that from them. And so when they were so supportive like that too, that just made me feel really good.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's so interesting to see, like, I relate, similar leaving the paralegal to do breath work. Granted, it wasn't 20 something years, but you hear you're going to teach people to breathe.
Yeah.
Like, people said that to me. Multiple people said that to me. You're leaving your paralegal job to teach people to breathe. And, not everybody gets it. So even that must be, I wish I could do that. If you didn't want to be here, if you want
Yep.
something bad enough, you can make a change.
Yeah, a lot of people project their fears. And so I saw some of that. But in the end, I was like, who do I really care about? And that was my family, my husband, my kids, my parents, my sister, and my friends knew, obviously. And then everyone else, it's like, that's okay. And I think now it's, I've already celebrated 6 years in business. This is the start of my 7th year. And it's like, I think people realize, oh, like she's really doing it,
Oh, I love that. Is there anything that helped you be so consistent? 6 years
Mhm.
going?
Well, you have the best laid plans and nothing turns out exactly as you plan. So I left in January of 2019 and COVID was a year later, right? So that was unexpected. And yet you shift, you make do, you kind of figure it out. And I just felt really supported all the time. I have strong faith. And so that was really helpful, even when I'm scared. Anytime I get stuck, I would always say, how can I serve? Where can I take the focus off myself and go help someone and serve? And every time I've done that, then the most beautiful things end up happening.
Do you feel like your faith helped you if there was ever times that you struggled, if you were able to keep on the path?
Oh my God. Yes. And I journal, I type journal every day. Like I type in, at the beginning it was every day. Now I need to, like, sometimes I'm not as consistent. It's like the word fear came up so many times, and I would constantly like have conversations with God, like, oh my gosh, like, okay, you say do not fear. Here's what's going on. you know, here's what I need. Here's what I'm believing. And so that was really helpful to keep me going. And also, being able to come back and say, wow, what did I fear would happen? And then what happened months later when I could look and see, oh, and this is how I was supported, or this is what happened instead. And so anytime I was worried about having a slower month or maybe not that many clients signing up, I was able to find other times where I was worried about those things, and then just to see how I was supported all along the way. And it's just really helpful to have that documented.
I love that, seeing, like, the actual examples. Sometimes our minds need that, like, the physical, like, "This is your proof."
Which is the opposite of faith, since faith is believing without proof. That's how we work.
I get it. No, that makes a lot of sense. And now I'm curious, if you struggled with balancing, like, you seem very like a boss babe, but balance, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but, like, balancing the masculine and feminine in business, because even myself.
I think that's my superpower for sure, because I tend to have a lot of healthy masculine energy, which is, let's get things done. Let's be very organized. I can manage multiple projects at the same time. It's really that energy that keeps you driven and ambitious and going. And at the same time, I've spent so many years, especially honoring my feminine energy as I went into entrepreneurship, because I did not want to burn out running my own business, right? Because the tendencies that we have could be the tendencies whether you're working for someone else or you're working for yourself. And so I didn't want to run my business the way I was operating when I was in corporate. And so I really wanted to focus in on making sure I had all my devotion practices, making sure I was taking really good care of myself, making sure that I was resting when I needed to, that I focused on my energetics and my frequency, and doing all the things that I needed in order to stay really grounded, crazy, driven. And so it is about just finding that daily alignment over and over again and checking myself. Like if something feels amiss, or if I can find myself slipping into old patterns and tendencies, just going, okay, wait a second, you need a second meditation today, or you need to take a nap, or you need to go outside and spend more time in nature. And if sometimes I just find myself stuck, then saying, okay, girl, you need a cold plunge, or you need to go like run, or you need a hot yoga class or something to like get your energy moving and start to like really move through some things, or just take one small action, even when you're scared. Finding that balance over and over again, and just but being able to tune in every single day and say, okay, where am I feeling? What do I need more of? What are those activities? And then showing up every day, doing what you need to do to keep that balance.
That makes a lot of sense. And would you say it's different day to.
Most of the time, I think sometimes there could be a streak, like if I don't pay attention and maybe I'm too in my masculine and I find myself overworked, overtired, like not getting results, even though I'm working a lot, then I'm like, okay, you've been in your masculine for way too long. Now you need to adjust. And then it may take more than one day. And so it just depends, like if I'm in a really good, healthy space, then you just make little adjustments daily. But sometimes if you stay in one space for too long, then it could take a little bit longer to get out of it. How do you feel? Do you feel like you're more masculine or feminine, or what do you do to kind of keep your balance?
I'd say I'm probably more masculine. I'm pretty, like, I have to find and allow myself the not being too like, okay, this is what we're doing, and like scheduling fun or scheduling joy is
Yeah.
something I don't always do. Oh, I think I'm doing it by like my walk, but like that's not always like that's still kind of the masculine.
Yeah.
Even though I'm like telling myself my walk brings me joy, but it's like
Behind it.
I struggle with the feminine joy, with the not being so go.
Many of us do. Sometimes we're wired that way. I'm wired that way. And it also is highly praised and rewarded in society too.
I'm curious. Have you heard of a man named Jay Shetty?
Oh, of course. Yes.
Okay. So he ends his podcast on purpose with 2 segments, and I've stolen them.
Oh.
I end my podcast with the same 2 segments. I think it kind of rounds out everything. The first segment is the many sides to us, and there's 5 questions, and they need to be answered in 1 word each. What is 1 word someone who was meeting you for the first time would use to describe you as?
Energy.
What is 1 word that someone who knows you extremely well would use to describe you as?
Loyal.
What is 1 word you'd use to describe yourself?
Kind.
What is 1 word that if someone didn't like you or agree with your mindset would use to describe you as?
Direct. Or bossy. Direct, I think. Yeah.
What is 1 word you're trying to embody right now?
Presence.
Second segment is the final 5, and these can be answered in up to a sentence. What is the best advice you've heard or received?
Surrender to God.
Why is that the best?
Because I think it pertains to every circumstance. Anytime I'm dealing with anything, if I just surrender and allow God to handle it, it just makes me feel better. It gives me a sense of greater peace and it activates my faith.
What is the worst advice you've heard or received?
Just push through.
Why is that the worst advice?
Oh my God, it's the highway to burnout. It's like, what too many people are doing is like, just push through. Don't be weak. You got this. It's like, no, those are your body's signals telling you to stop, to do the exact opposite.
Yeah. What is something that you used to value that you no longer value?
Titles.
If you could describe what you would want your legacy to be as if someone was reading it, what would you want it to say?
She embodied her purpose and was a vessel for the Creator to work through her and left this world a better place because of it.
If you could create 1 law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be? And I want to know why.
One law. It's funny. I go back to like when Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment was, and he said, love the Lord your God with all of you. And then he said, and love your neighbor as yourself. And if you do that, you'll find eternal life. And I just think about, wow, if we loved our neighbors like we loved ourselves and treated everyone that way, what kind of a world would that be? What kind of a world? How would we experience each other as being a direct reflection and mirror of one another? And I just think that if we were able to do that, we wouldn't hurt each other. We wouldn't need the rules for all these other things. Like it would just happen naturally. You wouldn't have to have a do and don't list because you just would be embodying love.
It's a lot of sense.
And
Well,
it's very
thank you so much. It is. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Amanda. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. I do just like to give it back to the guest Any final words of wisdom you want to share with the listeners?
Thanks for listening. And I think that what you cover, Amanda, is so important. I think you're embodying what it is that you're showing others, is that we can make a change. We can live through hard things, and it's never too late to decide that you want to do something different.
Thank you. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Manders Mindset. In case no one told you today, I'm proud of you. I'm rooting for you. And you got this. As always, if you enjoyed the show, I would really appreciate it if you would leave me a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share it with anyone you think would benefit from this. And don't forget, you are only one mindset shift away from shifting your life. Thanks, guys. Until next time.